Luisa, I think you can.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 11th webinar of the online initiative 2020, A Year Without Public Space, under the COVID-19 pandemic, jointly promoted by City Space Architecture and the School of Architecture at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and disseminated through the Journal of Public Space. We have today a webinar entirely dedicated to the discussion between analog and virtual realm. So we will discuss today about digital communication, digital tools and platforms, digital spaces, and how they are actually playing a crucial role during the pandemic for everyday practices of public life. We have speakers from Germany, since this webinar is co-hosted by the Department of International Urbanism at the University of Stuttgart. And we also have speakers from Italy and Portugal and Hong Kong. We also have a representative from UN Habitat from the Innovation Unit that will later discuss about presentations from all speakers. Before I give the floor to my colleague, Hendrik Thieben from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, I would like to just give you a few information regarding the next webinar that will take place on Thursday next week. We will have an expert group discussion engaging several international experts to discuss about some of the topics that we covered in the previous webinars. And we will also open a discussion with the audience, trying to answer to previous questions and all the questions that will be raised during the webinar next week. So this is also a way for us to engage with attendees instead of just presenting and giving you some insights on public space, because we would very much like to have feedback from all those who are attending this long line of webinars of this initiative. So enjoy the webinar to all attendees, and now I give the floor to my colleague, Hendrik.
Okay, so hello from me, Hendrik Thieben from Chinese University of Hong Kong. Thank you, Luisa. Just 2 words from me. I just want to explain how you can get in touch with us. In those webinars, you cannot use the chat button, but you can use the Q&A function, and basically through the entire webinar, send us your questions. And at the end, in the roundtable discussion, our moderator will pick questions from there. And also we will look at those questions that are not answered, and potentially also use this always for the last session always of the month, and sometimes come back to those questions. I also want to mention that all webinars so far, and also this one, will be later available on the City Space Architecture YouTube channel. So also this is an opportunity to see any of those earlier events, or also this one. I think the question of digital media, social media, has been already discussed in some of the earlier sessions. For example, we were talking about online teaching and global studios in the time of pandemics. We will have later in August another session on digital tracking and apps during the pandemics. But I think today will be a slightly different approach to the digital and the physical realm. Basically also looking at digital tools in terms of community, connecting communities and so on. Now I want to pass on the word to our guest host today, Astrid Ley, who's a professor and leading basically the Department of International Urbanism in Stuttgart. And they worked with us together and basically proposed this topic also because of their research in this particular field. So Astrid, you have the word.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Luisa. Thanks a lot, Hendrik, for giving us the opportunity to host today a webinar. And hello, everybody. Hello, the audience. We would like today to discuss with you the rethinking of public space, and this against the notion that in our cities we realize that people use both the physical analog space as well as the virtual space by means of digital tools. And this has particularly been experienced now during the lockdown during COVID-19. We claim further that through this experience, a kind of hybrid space is being constituted. And we've asked a number of questions around that, both in terms of what kind of digital tools are actually being applied in this context, and how do digital spaces then affect actually community building, but also participation and democracy in the wider realm. But also what are actually, if we discuss this, are the wider challenges and problems associated with the hybridization of digital and virtual spaces, and what eventually is the meaning also for urban planning and community organization as well as decision making. Well, in order to discuss these aspects, we have invited a number of experts, both experts from practice as well as from academia, who will join us today as speakers. And I would like hereby to introduce, first of all, Carlos Samyota Costa, who is a professor of urban ecology and landscape design at the Department of Architecture and Urban Planning of the Universidade Lusofana in Lisbon. And interestingly, he's been the editor and author of the book Neighborhood and City Between Digital and Analog Perspectives. Maybe, Carlos, you can raise your hand to identify who of the speakers is here. Secondly, speaking will be Franziska Schreiber. Franziska Schreiber is a lecturer and researcher here at University of Stuttgart with the Department of International Urbanism, but she's also senior associate with Adelphi and a consultant in the field of urban policy and planning. And she's been researching on the impact of digital tools and platforms for social cohesion in neighborhoods. Franziska, maybe you can briefly wave to the audience. Thirdly, also somebody from practice here is Federico Bastiani. Welcome, Federico. You are the administrator of the Facebook group Residenti in Via Fondazza Bologna and the founder of the website Social Street Italia. So we are very interested in hearing from your experience from practice. And then we have with us Franziska Turba. Franziska Turba works as a foresight consultant at Z. And she's been working on topics as urban development, sustainability, and service innovation. Franziska, maybe you can indicate who you are. And then the last presentation is by Tat Lam and Jessica Choing. Tat Lam is assistant professor at the School of Architecture at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And he's trained as an urban designer and architectural researcher. And we've invited him here because he's also a social entrepreneur and founder of Shanzai City, and thereby interested in researching how technological solutions empower also grassroots communities. Together with Jessica Choing, he will be presenting. She is an architecture and urban design practitioner and researcher in Hong Kong and in New York. And she was associate of Urbanus Hong Kong office and led multiple urban design and research practice. So finally, I would also like to welcome here Melissa Permetzel. Melissa, you are working with UN Habitat in the innovation unit, so very relevant for our topic here. You are from your background, an urban geographer, and you will, after the presentations of our speakers, a bit give us a few comments and fruit for thought how to think about the various presentations. Thanks for joining. With this small introduction, I would like to hand over to our first speaker, Carlos. Carlos, can you share your screen with us? And start your presentation. Yeah, and you need to unmute your micro first.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm working with two screens, but it seems to work. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Oh, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this interesting issue. I am landscape architect from my background. I studied in Germany and I did also my PhD there. And since then, I'm working here in Lisbon in different kinds of projects. I'm from the Department of Architecture and Urban Planning, but I'm also a member of a huge center of research center for education and development. We have a new kind of research centers here in Lisbon. They put everything almost together. And we have in our research center, urban planning, geography, history, and education. It's a very interesting combination. There are some different topics related. And in this center, I am working on different kind of projects. Most of them based centered on public open spaces. And from these 6 projects I have actually at the moment, I want to share with you some experience we have in 2 main projects where the public spaces were really in the center of the action. One was this cost action I coordinated, I chaired until 2018. And the other one is H2020 projects about how we can use technology to engage people in the co-creation of public spaces. This project is called C3 Places. So we have different projects. I'm working different networks like the DARIA. It's about practice to study.
Sorry, Carlos. Can you put your presentation in full screen mode, please?
It's not. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yes, fine, thanks.
Okay. The data, it's about how you use technology to engage people with their heritage, cultural heritage. So I'm working different fields, but most of them always centered in public spaces. In cyberparks, I think it was one of the main or the first projects that tackled this idea of having some hybrid spaces. So our main task was to try to understand what these hybrid spaces mean. What is this mediated space means? You have to think that we started this project in 2012 with the idea and get it approved 2013, 2014. We started the network for 4 years. It was a huge network, almost 90 people around Europe and USA. And for us was first idea try to understand and try to catch what is this hybrid spaces. So there are different ways we can put technology into the public space, into the city. So for us, we decided then to name this space that is hybrid, that is a combination between the virtual and the real world as a cyberpark. And for us, it is the space where nature, so the space and ICT blend together to generate an hybrid experience and to enhance the quality of life. This was for us very important, that we can use technology to bring people to be outside, to be outdoors, and to make their experiences in the city more valuable. So just to show you the different ways technologies coming into public spaces, the 3 main easiest ways to see them is here in Lisbon, for example, the city is using QR to inform tourists about the places where they are in. So it's very easy to see videos, to get information, background information about these spaces. So the other kind of street furniture that we are having in cities are equipments that we can upload, we can recharge batteries or go online, have Wi-Fi like here in Paris. Or so there are very few elements, very few components that are coming very slowly into the public spaces. For us, we decided that because of this huge area of interaction between the real and the virtual, that we have the main structure to understand it is to see where this technology is used. The first one is when it's in place. So that means the technology for analysis the place. And here we're very lucky because we have partners from Spain, and they started to develop an application that it was very useful for us, that we can track people when they are in public spaces. It's very simple in this way, but it's complicating the way especially about law and which data you can have. But we managed to organize a very nice, I think very important application to track people in public spaces and also to interact with these people. This was a very huge program that the University in Deusto in Bilbao in Spain had, and they offer this tool, and we organized different workshops, different tests with this tool. With this tool, we started in other project here in Lisbon. I will tell you later. So then the second way to see what is the interference or the application of ICT in public spaces is how we can enhance the experience of people in the place, and how people can give people information about the places. These are the three main structures used in the project. We produced a lot of literature, many publications, different books, almost one book every year. And we start, I think this is also very interesting, to collect examples, how the ICT comes into the public spaces, what are the value, especially to understand what is the value of this interference of these hybrid spaces. It's what we call a pool of examples. It's in our website, different ideas around the world, everyone can contribute. It's still increasing, still working. So we try to get an idea what does this means, this hybrid space, because it's, technology is so huge. There are different ways to use it. And we start with trying to put information together in this way that what are the main issues that people use in space, why people go to the public spaces, and why they do that, what is the reason they do that, and how technology can contribute to it. There are huge tables with different information. I don't want to go in examples and details with you. Everything is on our website. But I want to show you one example because this is a really a current issue because of the COVID-19, the pandemic, the question of public health. Many researchers have been working on that, the value of being outside, to contacting nature, to be outside, to be in the sun, to be in the fresh air. So for this, the healthy conditions or the health and mental well-being is very important, that we have spaces that people can go and use it and take advantage for being there. But we can only have these benefits if you have spaces where people live, spaces that are attractive, that are accessible, and are responsive. That means that spaces that meet the needs of people. Because there's no point to have somewhere in the city a public space that is not accessible, it's far away where people live. So if you want to have these conditions or the benefits we can gain from pub spaces, the spaces have to be there where people use them. And this was one attractive for us to check how we can use technology to engage people with their environment, with the creation of pub spaces. And this can be the idea of the next project I'm going into, is the C3 places. C3 means cooperation, coordination, and co-creation. How can we involve people in the co-creation of pub spaces? It's a 2020 project. It's going to finish in this October. We should have today and tomorrow our last conference, but COVID spoiled our plans. We are now collecting other ideas how we can manage that, because in Lisbon we cannot do anything face to face. So everything has to be online.
Yeah.
And
Carlos, can you sum up basically with maybe giving us a last idea of this Living Lab, because we are running out of time, unfortunately, already.
Okay. The Living Lab was the idea of to engage teenagers in the co-creation of public spaces. So we developed a huge research program and involving teenagers, how we can develop, because we have seen that they are not involved in decision making, they are not involved in the process of creating cities. So we want to engage teenagers to understand what are their needs and how we can engage them in co-creation. Very interesting for us is that we work with a school here in Lisbon, and we try to design the pub spaces in the way that they want to use. For us, it was very interesting because they don't want any faithful space. They want real space they can be together with peers. They want to be in the nature, so they want to have more green, and they want to have a dedicated space. That means a space that the adults don't have a surveillance on them. These were the basic needs they have. I think this is not really something faithful out of the box, but it's a real need that we have to give an answer to that. From my opinion, or from this, what we can have from this project is technology is good. It's good that we have, but it has to make sense. It has to bring an added value for the ones that use the space, wants to use the space, and for that ones that are not using now but can use in the future. And the smart city doesn't alone mean that we need technological fixes, but we have to involve people, because for them we create the city. And technology or virtual space is not a substitute for a physical space. Technology is not a substitute. We have seen that even with people with own gardens, possible ways to be outside, they still need public space. They use a public space. So that means for us, technology, it's an added value. It's good, but it doesn't substitute public spaces. And public spaces we need to have where people live in. These are the main points that I want to share with you. Our projects are online, and we have a lot of literature and ideas to share. And for sure, I'm here if you have any question. Thanks for your attention.
Yes, thanks a lot, Carlos. I think you already raised a lot of aspects about the ways of how technology merges with our ideas of space, and your Living Lab at the end already gave us very close ideas of this idea, how we can use technological means for a proper analysis or more in-depth understanding of needs. I think Franziska Schreiber will now shed a bit of a different aspect. You also mentioned the aspect of these tools for community engagement and a different form of interaction. And I will hand over to you now, Franziska.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay, perfect. So hello everyone, and thank you also from my side for having me. I'm Franziska Schreiber, and as Astrid already pointed out, I'm working with her at the Department of International Urbanism at the University in Stuttgart. And what I would like to do in the next couple of minutes is to draw your attention to the role of digital neighborhood platforms during the COVID-19 pandemic, but also potentially in the future. And if I would have to put it with Carlos' words, and Astrid just mentioned it, this is probably a technology for community engagement about place. So this is how he had categorized it. And why I want to focus on this issue is because I noticed that much of the neighborhood support and solidarity actions we have witnessed in response to COVID-19 in the analog realm was actually initiated virtually on exactly such platforms. But interestingly, we know so little about how they operate, how they're being used, especially in times of crisis, whether they can increase and contribute to community resilience, and also how they affect and shape social cohesion at the local and the city level. So what I want to do is I want to share some of my observations from the German context with you, and also reflect a little bit on earlier research I have conducted on this issue. So your question might now be, okay, so what are digital neighborhood platforms? If we would have to define them, I would say there are hyperlocal social networks that seek to connect people actually in the immediate environment, so in a geographically defined area, both online and offline, and ease the exchange of local information and services. They're actually rather, I would say, a new phenomenon. They emerged about 10 years ago, but they're already quite successful, and not just because of COVID-19, but because they respond, I would say, to a growing demand of people to overcome the widely felt anonymity in cities, especially in larger ones. And in fact, over the past couple of years, we have seen an emergence of such platforms around the world. Here on the right side, I've included a couple of logos from these different platforms that exist. The most prominent one is probably Nextdoor, operating in the US, but now also available in Europe. Then we have Neighborly, which is a platform in New Zealand, or Nebenan.de, a platform in Germany. And where such platforms are available, it became quite obvious that they then very often turn into very important sites for social interaction, for public debates, and for civic engagements, and for more and more people fulfill actually functions that are traditionally associated with analog public spaces. And I think this is quite important to bear in mind, especially if we talk about this issue in the context of COVID-19, where analog public spaces were to be avoided or even restricted to use. So those virtual spaces actually also allow communities to share local information, to ask for advice, or to offer help and connect with others. And so it was quite obvious that doing, and especially at the beginning of the COVID-19, such platforms took on quite a prominent role. And I would like to illustrate this by focusing on the German context, on Germany's largest neighborhood platform, which is called Nebenan.de. It was founded in 2015, and it already has more than 1.6 million users. And what's important to say is that it operates as a social business. So it generates its revenues from voluntary contributions and cooperation with local businesses and city authorities who pay fee for their business and organizational profiles. But if you register as an individual person, then it's free of charge. And it was quite fascinating actually to see that as soon as the corona pandemic actually took off, user numbers and activities on this platform increased really significantly. So to give you just some numbers, between mid-March and the end of April, daily registrations quadrupled, nationwide membership increased from 1.4 to 1.6 million users, and weekly activities increased by 30%. But it was not just the quantitative numbers that changed, but also the content of the activities themselves, because all of a sudden people started using the platform to offer and organize corona-related help. So assistance was provided for grocery shopping on these platforms, childcare was offered, or support for learning activities. And the platform itself also expanded its activities and came up with its own corona, or the dedicated kind of corona help page and hotline, and also started cooperating with a number of city authorities in Germany, allowing them to pass on corona-related information directly to citizens that are using the platform. So that means that if you're on the platform, if you use such platforms, then you can benefit from additional information, you can benefit from crucial support structures and also relevant knowledge that is being shared on such platforms, which increases the capacity to adapt to the effects of the pandemic. But then, of course, it's always the question of who uses such platforms and who benefits. And unfortunately, there's no empirical research published yet on the use and implications of these platforms during Corona. But earlier research I have conducted on this issue kind of came to rather ambivalent conclusions, I would say, because on the one hand, yes, such platforms really can expand the local social network of people. They meet new friends, they establish loose contacts to others. People we interviewed also expressed an increased feeling of belonging and trust in the neighborhood. But then again, not all social groups use such platforms equally, and especially people with a lower socioeconomic background are greatly underrepresented, and also people with migration background feel very often hardly addressed by monolingual digital networks. So this in turn means that certain groups fall out or fall through the neighborhood support system, and not just analog, but also digitally, which in turn means that they may end up being potentially doubly disadvantaged. So while such platforms can potentially increase social cohesion and also contribute to community resilience, they also definitely bear the risk of reinforcing social inequalities if not well designed. So what does it mean for post-corona times? What can we learn from this? I think what became obvious is that they play an important role in order to really quickly and flexibly organize community support in times of crisis. They provide a really useful crisis management tool, but they also have their limitations we should learn from, especially considering that an increasing part of public and social life will take place virtually in the future. And so I think it would make a lot of sense to conceptualize and recognize those platforms as digital public spaces, which need to be planned and designed and managed just as carefully as their physical counterparts in order to be socially inclusive. And this necessitates a much better understanding of how such platforms work, how they're being used, why certain groups use them and others don't, and how we can make them more accessible to counteract social inequalities and to address the digital divide. And one point I would like to raise, especially also with regards to the discussion later, is that I think it's quite important to know that the most frequently used platforms, such as Nebenan.de in Germany or Nextdoor in the US, are actually operated commercially, which to me raises really the fundamental questions of data protection, sustainable financing, how to yeah, provide and maintain such useful digital infrastructure also in the long run, and what the potential role of the public sector could also be in this regard. Yeah, this is just so far from my side, but I'm looking forward to our discussion later. And
yes. Thanks a lot, Franziska. I think you've raised some very critical questions already towards the end of your presentation, which nicely leads over to Federico, who now maybe finds a reaction, how he, with his platform, actually takes up these maybe challenges also around social exclusion in the virtual space and so on. I would be very interested to hear from that. Federico, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, Social Street work different about all platform that Franziska mentioned. Social Street started in 2013 here in Bologna with the objective to recreate the sense of community inside the street. It started starting from my personal necessity, because I had a small kid at that stage, and we didn't have any family support around us. I work far from home. I spend more than 2 hours to go to work, to come back. So I didn't have any time or occasion to know my neighborhood. So we start a simple. We start to talk with my wife and say, okay, what I can do to solve this problem. And we decided to open at this stage. Nextdoor was not developed yet, and any kind of other platform. So we decided to use a Facebook group, a closed Facebook group, and to invite people to join, just to socialize. You know, I remember the first advertise I did in my street. I just printed with my printer some leaflet and put under all door in my streets. That is 1 kilometer, and to see the reaction of the people. No, if people wanted to join the virtual community, but the objective was to use the online just to bring people together, but then to move in the real life. So for us, it was not important the user. No, for Nextdoor, all this platform needs a user and they need data, of course, to create a business. For Social Street, no, because there is not a business model behind this. It is a social project. Okay. So how it works in real life? When I opened the first group, I saw that people start to interact with each other, support each other. But the interesting part is that each kind of interaction was important to create a real bond in life. For example, I remember one of the first posts was people, because I opened at the end of summer, and there was people that was leaving for holidays, and so he was writing the group, okay, I'm leaving, I have the fridge full of food, and does anyone want some vegetable? And these were the opportunity to say, okay, I live at the number 32. Okay, I live at the number 29. And these people doesn't know each other, but they live 10 meters apart. So it was an excuse to bring people together. Then for us, it's not important if they use the platform. At this point, you have created a sort of relationship based also on the gift. This is another important aspect about our project. You know, there are no money involved in this project. Everything you do for the community is because it doesn't cost nothing for you to do something for other people. And this is another big chapter about sociologists, but okay, I don't want to start. We can talk maybe another time about this. So people start to interact online, and then they start to meet in the real life, in the street, organize a little of small parties, or they share their passion and they form, for example, inside our street, they discover there are a lot of musicians, and every Sunday they organize a little concert in the street for other neighbor, or the trekking group, because there are people that love to walk and they find together every Sunday to work together. So many little projects that started inside, because each street has a lot of potential. You don't know your neighbor, so there is a lot of diversity, no? So this project spread a lot all around the world. Of course, when we have been featured on the first page of New York Times, can you imagine that everyone want to copy this and we did not prepare it, because as I mentioned before, this is not there is not a staff behind Social Street. Social Street is just an idea. It's not a registered company. It's not trademark, logo, nothing. No, it is just an idea that we want to seed and see how it grows. After 7 years, we are here to talk about this project. So for me, I'm always surprised about this, because we invested zero money in 8 years. So anyway, when COVID started, the pandemic started, I was asking to myself, I was interested to observe Social Street and see now what's happened to this kind of project that make our claim is from virtual to the real. So now that you can do only one part of this project, maybe Social Street finish, or maybe. So I realized that, of course, sociality can be stopped by a virus, of course. Maybe sociality change, but okay, it is a human necessity. So there is nothing you can compress. And I observed a lot of Social Street in this period that just did little things, but very important, because I realized that for the people, the important things were to feel part of a community. You know, there was a lot of anxiety, fear, and to know that you have someone around you ready to support, just with a word or something, was very important. So, for example, I remember here in my street, there was a person working for Red Cross. So he worked every day, and her uniform was broken, no? And all shop, all tailor was closed, and the neighbor offered her to fix, or people that, for example, I remember this is a funny story. Maybe you remember, there were, at least here in Italy, there was a huge line in front of the shop, no, to buy grocery. So in one Social Street, there was one old lady using Facebook and put the chair on the terrace, and in real time writing, "Okay, neighbor, you can come now. There is no anyone in the line. You can run to make the shop." So nothing spectacular, but of course, these little things that people feel very gratitude to other neighbor, and it was very, very important. I observed that the interaction inside Social Street increased of 300% in this period, of course. No? So what I can say that Social Street just changed the way to work. Of course, now it started as usual, but in the period, it has been very interesting to observe how the system adapted by itself.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Federico. I think your account gives it somehow a real-time idea of how these kind of platforms operate and are experienced by neighbors in the particular situation we had now. And I think there's a lot we later in the discussion can exchange about what are maybe cross-cutting ideas, because I think your model also reflects on a very different kind of organization behind it. Yeah, as you outlined, it's not a business model, it's basically a bottom-up initiative, and that would be probably also an interesting aspect to take further in our discussion. But before doing so, I want to hand over to Franziska Turba, who maybe has now even listened to the previous presentations. She has prepared a presentation with a reflection more on overall ideas of the meaning of a transformation towards more virtual spaces. And Franziska, I would like to hand over to you hereby.
Yeah, thank you, Astrid. And also thank you for having me. My name is Franzi Turba, and I'm a foresight consultant at Z. So I'm dealing a lot with how technology or like what different technology narratives we have in the future, or how technology might look like. My approach is, and I may be already a bit sorry that I might be a bit dark in the next 7 minutes, yeah, my approach is a bit more of a critical reflection on technological developments. And I see also, of course, I mean, you showed very, very nice projects at the moment, where what are particularly in those critical times of Corona very necessary for society. But I also see a very critical development with this kind of rapid tech acceleration we have at the moment with Corona, that certain tech developments are kind of boosted in one direction. So I'd like to start with one quote, which is that we live in strange times first of all. So we are somehow in very challenging times. We face maybe, and I really like the word, this is why I put it in German, we face rasenden Stillstand. And this comes from a text Armin Avanesian wrote, a philosopher I pretty much like. So he wrote a pretty interesting article about what we perceive at the moment. So it is what he refers to as subjective deceleration. So of course, this is very much spoken from the perspective of a person that is not working in a systemic relevant job, and who can maybe easily work from home, and definitely does not have to work in a hospital or also like in a shop. So it is a very privileged position that you at the moment might feel some ease, and everything is like calming down a bit in those times. And this is kind of a paradox between because we have this kind of complete standstill of everyday life, but in fact we have a pretty much of an acceleration of major transformations at the moment. So this is what I try to kind of draw in this not even half scientific graph. So it's just to give you some sort of image, so that we have this tech transformation, or this transformation of major development that just goes up, and that we kind of have this acceleration through Corona, that, as my colleague phrases it, that 3 months of Corona kind of equals like a tech acceleration that we usually would have in 3 years, in 3 normal years. So and so now we are sort of deprived with this new circumstances of Corona to move really within our cities. So it's actually the digital technologies that we put our hope in that should somehow fill that void. And at the moment we are pretty dependent on it. We might use it maybe more pragmatic than ever. So we use Facebook and Instagram for getting reach. We're using Zoom because it has the best connection, maybe without considering actually to kind of put ourselves in a position that we are creating the next monopolistic firm, let's say. So this is why I would just say that, or not just I, but that there is a critical reflection of the use of digital technology necessary. First of all, maybe there is definitely some sort of, or it's more like an excursion now, that we definitely have some blurring of lines between the analog space and the digital space. And as I already said, Corona acts as some sort of additional driver for this for this development. So we have new augmented and virtual reality applications that provide entirely new experiences of social interactions in everyday life as well as in public spaces. So, for example, last autumn, Facebook presented its vision of future social communication. So with Horizon, Facebook envisions lifelike avatars to meet in virtual reality worlds. So friends meet irrespective of being in different places and share experiences in those worlds. And this Facebook Horizon is already in like an alpha trial phase. And of course, there's different platforms like Mozilla, which provides an open source based version. We at the office very much use it, or what, yeah, very much use is maybe a bit exaggerated because it has still its flaws, but it somehow provides really a bit of this, we are not seeing each other because we're all working in home office, so we can like meet at least at some virtual reality space and have a bit of more haptic experience. So there is, of course, which I think is pretty interesting. Maybe this is just like mentioned as a side note, people are at some point pretty familiar already with the virtual spaces. For example, there is this trend of video game photography, just as a side note. For example, this is an artwork of Joshua Taylor. So people are going into the video games and screenshotting every kind of nice nature shot and whatever. So we also have, I mean, these examples where I can somehow, simulate virtual worlds that I'm maybe in times of Corona deprived. But there's also the other way around, which I like a lot is Olafur Eliasson's augmented reality art platform. He has the idea that with augmented reality, you can make art pieces much more available for people, and they are much more experienceable for people. So, but I mean, this is all nice, but as I already said before, like this pragmatic use of technology is maybe also related with some dangers. And maybe it really needs some critical reflection, because when I think about the technology development, and in particular now in Corona times, there is something to be careful about. So it's not just in Corona times, but it's a trend that we experience a shift in power towards Silicon Valley tech firms, for example. So this goes on for quite a while, that we have the shift towards the digital space. So just think about right now that we are deprived from the spatial, so we have to be like in the digital. So the Silicon Valley tech firms, the GAFAs, are expanding their power within their existing business model, because a lot of people use it and they can somehow concentrate a lot of data on people. And the other way around, this is also largely affecting the urban realm, because those times where we already experienced a shift towards the digital, it is weakening or desertificating the analog space. So as we saw in, for example, in Asia, when there was the SARS, going on in the 2000s, we saw pretty much of a shift or this rise of Alibaba, the rise towards e-commerce. So we have this weakening of the analog space. So we have the shops that are closing because everything is going to e-commerce. But at the same time, this weakening is somehow used by technology firms to somehow expand their business model also into the spatial. So the GAFA explore new business opportunities within the urban realm. So just to show you in which way they are expanding at the moment, or which kind of visions technology firms. I mean, I just say Silicon Valley, of course. This is also applying to the Asian tech companies as well. But this, I don't know, I just said it a bit from this Western perspective. So this is, for example, the vision of seasteading. So I just put out the claim of seasteading, which is reimagining civilization with floating cities. So it sounds very, like a social utopia of in the way of Californian liberalism. So seasteading is supposed to be an independent state. So it should supposed to be independent from binding laws. And this should leave room for innovation, for experimentation. So it's all in this innovation sense. And it kind of stresses this techno-emancipatory mindset to improve the world and do this better than any kind of state government. So of course, there is also the Cyborg Lab. This is the vision of the Google sister. So, which also like, I guess it was just a couple of months ago that they closed the idea of developing it further. But the idea was actually to establish an urban planning project in Toronto. And which is also, it sounded quite nice, but in the end, when you read the articles about, okay, I mean, in the end, they have everything kind of, they have urban participatory projects, or like participation is a big issue, but in the end, when you see like how the processes behind worked, actually, it's not that much of a citizen participatory project, but it's more like a tech-driven project. But I mean, as said, they closed it down, and I guess they mentioned that the financial risks were too high. So maybe to close, it is very important to understand, and also in times like this, where somehow future is accelerating at a pace where you have to react right now. I mean, now those times of exception allow very much like letting it go and working it the pragmatic way. But in the end, those times particularly require thinking and acting so that we are kind of developing into a future we actually want to. So do we want development towards a tech-determined post-political urban planning, or do we actually go for the citizen-centered urban planning? So we have, on the one hand, this mindset of what I explained right now. We have this solutionism, this trust in the omnipotence of technology. And I mean, do we want that we have on the other side maybe a humanist approach towards citizen planning? We in the tech-determined post-political urban planning, we have something like the city as a growth model. So, for example, Anthony Townsend mentions that basically, doing business models in the urban sphere for those tech companies is pretty much of a low-hanging fruit. So they can harness a lot of data in doing business models there. So it's basically just lying around. In this model, citizens are seen as a source of data, and the citizen is seen as a user. While it's supposed to be that the city is actually a livable human space where at any time the citizen is put at the center of the planning. So
almost take that as a good closing word, the citizen at the center, because we are running out of your presentation time. And I think it would build a wonderful bridge towards our last presentation for today, because we would then from here shift to Hong Kong and hear what Tat Lam and Jessica Choi have to say about how digital tools can maybe become something which is helping, let's say, grassroots empowerment and follow up on that idea about humanistic and towards citizen directed urban planning could potentially look like. Franziska, thanks for sharing your thoughts. I would like then to hand over to Tat Lam.
Sure, yeah.
Excuse me, can we share the screen? Maybe,
yeah, I'm just leaving. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So hello everybody. Quick introductions. My name is Tat Lam, and my colleague Jessica Jiang. I'm personally also teaching at the university, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and our company is actually a civic technology company that we develop blockchain and artificial intelligence solutions for grassroots development. I think today's presentation is really going to focus on two parts. The first part is going to be two case studies. I think Jessica is actually going to present. It's actually going to be about like a digital marketplace that we formed in grassroots community. And the second case is going to be a digital town hall for the village to actually make decisions about their developments. The role of technologies in these two cases are, the automation about the data flow, the automation of the capital flow, and also the automation of the supply or the goods flow. And I think we actually touch a few topics, for example, like digital citizenship, digital identity, like how cryptography can actually creating a very unique types of identity kind of situation on an online or a cyber kind of public space. And at the end of the presentation, I will also talk about the implications of these two projects and what happened of that during the COVID time, because that's actually quite interesting. So I'll pass to my colleague, Jess.
Thank you, Ted. So hi, I'm Jessica Chang. So let me introduce the two cases from our company. So the first cases I would like to introduce is about the community currency in Hong Kong. So it's like a community self-organized local mutual support system, online and offline, before and after during the COVID time. So the concept of time-based currency has been initiated like a few decades ago. And however, the term time bank was originally promoted by an American professor Edgar in US. So whereas in this system, people agree to earn and spend time credits instead of money. And when you spend an hour of an activity that helps others, you will receive one-time credit. And when you need help from the others, you will then use the time credits that you save to pay for the service. So that's actually promoting like equal time, equal the value. And it's also advocating mutual help among community members. So when this concept came to Hong Kong, what's interesting is that it evolved into a response to economic instabilities during the time of financial crisis in Hong Kong 2008. So at that time, the time voucher program itself was self-organized by local NGOs in Hong Kong to help the community members to build local economy system to resist the global economic instability. So for example, like in Hong Kong, each NGO will help their community to launch their own time voucher as the local currency to exchange for their local products and services. And therefore, you can find pretty interesting local economy with neighborhood characteristics of ecosystem starts to emerge. So for example, like in Tin Shui Hui, which is this area pretty far away from the city center of Hong Kong, it has a lot of farms and natures. So people there with the time voucher of Tin Shui Wei, they can go to the local food market to buy fresh, locally grown produce once a week. So this actually helps to support a lot of local small farmers because now they are not only selling their produce to a normal market for money, but they can also expand their sale to a new group of customers who originally may not have the enough cash to buy their produce. So this new group of customers can be unemployed people, low income, single mother, or new immigrants who can now contribute their time and also skills to exchange for the goods and services that support their daily lives. So, however, the existing time voucher program is there's a lot of effort for the NGO in the bookkeeping and also like managing all the time voucher transactions using paper and manually. And it's simply just hard to maximize the benefits of the time voucher program because there are not enough exchange happening within the community. So what we did is actually partnering with the local NGOs in Hong Kong, and we bring their existing system, digitalize their existing practice, and bring their marketplace online to facilitate a larger volume of local transactions, and to even facilitate cross-district exchange. So this new public space emerged on a digital market where now community members can post their products and services, while on the other hand, people can also post their needs. And more importantly, how our platform different from other e-commerce platform is that we deployed so-called digital decentralized identifications, which are actually various personal informations such as their identity, assets, skills, and also needs, which could be verified by peers and community members to make the data immutable and also privately protected by the blockchain. So during the COVID time, because of the shortage of the mask supply and a lot of elderly, they simply just couldn't get out there to buy a mask. So people self-initiate the crowdsourcing of materials and people with skills on this time voucher platform to produce masks for the people in need. So eventually we hope to develop the platform to a social impact marketplace, which facilitates the matching and also exchange of validated social needs from the community, and also like trustworthy social service provided by the local business and micro entrepreneur. The second case that I will introduce is about a community development project, which is like a collaborative development of micro-scale public space in Myanmar. So in this project, there's a huge infrastructural investment gap between the government and the community. So what we are trying to do is to pilot this digital platform for a community member to crowdsource, identify needs from their neighborhood, and also like we also use this mobile app to allow the community member to claim the successfulness and also completion of the project after the project has been done. So for example, like in this mini public space, which a playground has been built. So after the project has been completed, community members, they can then validate if the project has been built successfully or according to what they need. So what we hope is that this digital platform can really advocate community participation, more transparent funding deployment, and also like more democracy in the process of community building of the public space. Yeah. So I think Ted, you can conclude.
Yeah. So just maybe just a very quick conclusion. I think the whole idea about the works that we have been doing is to create the local community economic resiliency. That means they're actually not only relying on a global economic system. So basically when there is a COVID lockdown, the entire globalism and the entire supply chain management for the whole world has been broken down. So basically there's a lot of needs and requirements from local for people to understand how they can survive by themselves. Can I go down to the next one? So I think the entire programs that we are developing is actually moving from centralized. People originally think about into a distributed system. Next, please, James. But eventually we just find out that the distributed system is actually not working, because when the COVID come in, it's essentially just breaking down the entire global network. And then eventually it's, bring us to a decentralized system, which is actually creating a very small scale cells of local communities. So basically there are always two scales of economic transactions. One is the global and the other one is the local. And when there is a crisis coming in, people at least have the freedom of choice that they want to participate in the global economy or the local economy. And that actually creating this economic resilience at the end of the day. I think the last 6 months, there's actually like a 10 times increase of users in all the programs of the time vouchers in Hong Kong. And they need to work on the farm and earn the tokens so that they can buy food. Or there are even very interesting activities that people crowdfund the time tokens to help their friends for buying food from a food bank. So, I think there's actually once this kind of public base is actually created, we actually really, creating this, what we call a micro design for agile adaptive change, because every single proposal is actually from communities, not from a researcher, not from a university, not from the government. And the second thing is the microservice. It's that, how small, how granular those services can be, so that it can be a huge amount of that, but very specific. And the last one is about the micro policy. It's not about a policy about a whole region. It's about a policy for my village or for this 100 people building. Can we creating a policy, a governance that can actually be automated by the technology and creating the efficiency. I think that's the end of our presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, both to Jessica and Tat. Really powerful images and really strong statements also how to rethink community development for the future. I think it raises maybe a lot of also questions and comments. And before I now would like to hand over to Melissa, I would like to really ask the audience, please, in terms of all the presentations, make use of the questions and answer forum and raise questions you have or comments you would like to give. If you raise this question or comment towards a specific speaker, please also mention this, and maybe if it's of importance also in terms of what your own background is. Now, Melissa, you followed now the very diverse presentations, and we are very curious to hear your thoughts about it. Can I hand over to you?
Yes, thanks very much, Astrid. Can you hear me and can you see me? I seem to be having a few technology issues my end.
We hear and see you perfectly. Thank you.
Oh, good. Okay. Look, thank you very much to all the speakers. This is so my name's Melissa Permazel. I'm coordinating, it's a new innovation unit within UN Habitat, and I'm based here in Nairobi in Kenya. So welcome from a hello from another part of the world. And we're really pleased to be part of this event. So thank you all very much. That was an amazing set of speakers. If I can just, Astrid, just give some observations. I think there were really some many terrific themes that came about what is the new public space? Is it just that streetscape and that town square that we've been used to visualizing? Or is the platform providing a new dynamic and a new entry point for many? Is it as safe? Are there still safety questions around this sort of platform space? I couldn't help thinking about some of the questions about women's safety, which you think might be resolved on a platform, but then you know that there are many stories about people also having their privacy invaded and on the verge.
Melissa, now you're breaking up for a moment.
So I couldn't help but thinking about, and can you hear me now? I think you can hear me now. Yes, I do apologize.
No, don't worry, but the last aspect we could listen was about the safety question and where you raised this, that also in the virtual space, safety questions emerge, and then you were
Yes,
unfortunately.
I think that just I can leave it at that, and I think, you know, there was a perhaps a suggestion that are these virtual platforms perhaps taking the place of the physical space, and I don't think it's that sort of that duality. I think it's a much more that there's a wider realm of understanding place and space than perhaps that we can now imagine. And I think that's a really exciting one. But as many speakers have raised, it also does raise questions about this for who and for how and for what and for why. And there are these questions about power and access. And I mean, you've just seen from the interruption of my my flow of conversation here that there is a digital divide, and we really, you know, I live in a posh part of Nairobi where we have some access to the internet, but there are many ordinary citizens particularly in cities in this part of the world that haven't been able to reimagine another sort of public space in the way that perhaps many of the speakers are talking about today. So I think globally that does raise some very interesting questions about how we can imagine public space. And I think just calling back on the first speaker's talk about the health aspects of public space, I found it very interesting to understand that with COVID, that public space is now considered a risk, whereas for so many years, we need to get out and be healthy in public space. So there are kind of lots of dichotomies being raised in this moment that I think are really important that we think through. And I don't think it's an and/or. There's a context for everything that needs to be thought through. And just on the time voucher platforms, which I find absolutely fascinating, again, particularly from this part of the world where we have a huge informal economy, this question of the power of public space, which I think in some parts of the world is often associated with recreation and sort of mixing. I think that the last speakers really raised this economic value in a way that probably is not often included in mainstream economics as hardcore economics. And I think that is really exciting because it probably also brings in some of the domestic sphere and how people are struggling to combine many aspects of their work in this new space, and that these time voucher platforms provide a public space to express themselves, not only perhaps socially, but also to raise money. So I think these are wonderful and really exciting, but also raise the questions of how do we think through public space in this very dynamic field. So thanks to all the speakers, I thoroughly enjoyed.
And thanks a lot, Melissa, for really pointing out some of the cross-cutting issues we've been discussing today. And looking at the question and answers, there's for a long time now this question by Kelly here, who actually is really interested in one aspect you've been also raising, Melissa, about for who, yeah? And it has been a topic which was raised by some of the speakers, yeah, in how far can we speak here of a realm which is really accessible for all, or in how far do we need to caution also here, or maybe particularly take effort to make it an equal space? And if I can read this question, Kelly, I'm not sure if the background herself is from Brazil, but she's raising the issue in terms of how can digital technologies be effective in helping promoting better public spaces in very unequal realities? And here the example is given of Brazilian big cities where part of the population live on the outskirts and have no access to this kind of technologies. And I was wondering who of the speakers might want to give some ideas or response to that question, since it was raised by various presentations. I'm not sure if I can link back to also Tate and Jessica as a first response, if that is also something which has been discussed in your projects, who has access to these technologies, since you're very much focused on this idea of addressing urban poverty and community development.
Yes, definitely. I think we actually also have a project in Brazil. Technology is actually used to collecting data from, ethnic minorities in the northern of Brazil in the city called Boa Vista. It's actually a city between Brazil and Venezuela. And that is basically like, how to say, like, there's a lot of very interesting situations. There's just local indigenous people, the refugee people from other countries. So basically, it's actually like a mixture of those. I think the question about like, those kind of reality and equality to us is actually it's actually not, how to say, it's actually an inevitable problem that we have to solve. Because fundamentally, what we believe is that the future of poverty is actually going to caused by digital inequality. It's basically like you just cannot access to data, you just cannot access to cell phone. So basically, you're eventually going to get exploited. So there's a very fundamental concept that we always been screening. It's called data literacy, like how literate you are to actually engage with data and technology. And entire solution, the technology solutions, is actually going to base on what kind of category of data literacy that we're dealing with. Like, are we dealing with people's have absolutely no data and no cell phone? So basically, there's something what we call data intermediary. Like there's a lot of banks in.
That we lost you.
Our data intermediary is gone.
Jessica, do you want to?
Jessica, can you maybe follow up?
Yeah, sure. So the data intermediary is the concept that is like it's like a middle between the end beneficiaries and the organization. So the organization actually send out those kind of like a decentralized agency to the front line. So helping those communities to either get onboarded to the digital platform or just to simply assist them to use the digital solutions that we are deploying in the field.
Okay, thank you. There's one topic which crossed my mind because it was now raised by Melissa, being situated in Nairobi and us in Germany, and then the topic of a big Brazilian city, and there's the center and the outskirts and the accessibility to these technologies. And I somehow also have this idea that we might have to refine our understanding here. Even in Germany, this topic is being discussed, and the discussion is between access to these technologies in larger cities versus peripheralization of smaller towns, rural areas. Yeah. So 5G, for instance, will probably now be just only introduced in the larger cities, and it has a meaning of inequality in different urban realms also in that way. Yeah. And for instance, now the presentation that Franziska Schreiber was giving on nebenan.de, I was wondering, Franziska, you were also raising the different users who can access it or don't access it. But your study is, I think, focused on Berlin. Would you also foresee that it makes a difference in which, let's say, city conurbation we look at these technologies and their application?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the study I've conducted in the past in digital neighborhood platforms, so before Corona, was actually not just on Berlin, but we also focused on a neighborhood rather at the outskirts of Munich and then at 2 smaller cities. And we also not only focused on nebenan.de, but on different platforms. So we focused on local Facebook groups and on a platform which is called Lokalportal, which is actually quite interesting because it kind of take a slightly different perspective and addresses only villages or smaller cities, but there the aim is of course slightly different in terms of not connecting people because people typically know each other, but rather trying to crowdsource information and knowledge to compensate perhaps for a lack of infrastructure. And that was also the case. I mean, Munich, the outskirts of Munich is of course not rural or anything, but also there we focused on a neighborhood which was kind of developed in the 50s and 60s. We had these really high-rise buildings and really a lack of public spaces. So a lot of people, especially elderly who are using such platforms, simply don't know how to get in touch with others. There's really high level of anonymity, and now they're quite happy actually to have such a platform because it really offers a sort of introductory service to reach out to others, because it lowers the threshold to get in touch with others. And now they are kind of also looking together into other neighborhoods where they could then potentially meet, but the getting to know each other happens first virtually, and then the meeting occurs in the analog realm. So with respect to who uses such platforms, I think, yes, Nebenande is focused on larger and larger cities, but there are also platforms targeting other kind of urban or semi-urban contexts. I think what I found quite interesting is that on those locally oriented digital tools, you also find a lot of elderly people, more than you would probably expect. So the average age on Nebenande we found was around 40, 45, and you also had a lot of like older people around 70 or 75 who feel alone, who are singles, who want to reach out and, you know, find like-minded people to play cards with or whatever. But I think the question is, A, digital literacy, what we just discussed, but also, I mean, you want to connect neighbors, but then you also have to ensure that you provide such platforms in different languages, because not everyone is familiar with German or doesn't speak it as fluently. So we should think about different interface designs and how to set up such platforms differently to also account for the multicultural backgrounds that we have in all countries, basically.
Okay. Now the chat is opening up. I see that it triggers more comments. I think next to this idea of who's maybe excluded, who do we need to look at to also access other forms of spaces, there's this question which was also highlighted in Melissa's comment, but also Franziska Turba and others pointed to that, this aspect of data security, yeah, and who's actually behind that. And there's one question raised, it is now here in the chat raised towards Tat and Jessica. And the question is if the users are aware that you make use of this decentralized identity platform in contrast to other platforms that may be subject to surveillance. I think that question I would also not only raise to Tat and Jessica, but also to Federico, since he might also have something to say about this. Tati, you want to start and then I hand over to Federico?
Yes, maybe I can, I think I can start. Hello, I'm sorry, yeah, maybe I can start. I think the idea is on the one hand, try to creating a platform that the platform can be sustainable. Because I think there are a lot of existing technology platform, like the way, the protocols that how they're handling personal data, eventually going to cause a lot of problems. So I think on the one hand, even though they're not really aware about that, I think there is actually a more and more concerns from a technology perspective to designing a more trustworthy technology platform of handling data. The second one is that, when we're actually doing all these kind of projects, there's always a capacity building process for us to teach people like what is so-called data sovereignty. So the data that you're contributing to this system is actually not belonging to governments. It's not belonging to Facebook. It's not belonging to anybody. It's actually belonging to yourself. And how you really understand, this kind of data is actually your assets. If you're like a poor people, you don't have money, but you have a lot of data. Like your data is actually more valuable than your cash. So, I mean, I think that's actually the turning point, like how we actually eventually want to, through advocacy and capacity building, to even, avoid data labor and data exploitation.
Okay. Federico, in your case, is there discussions about what happens to my data? What platform do you use? You need to turn your micro on. briefly?
Sorry. No, yeah, sometimes there's been this kind of discussion about the data, protecting data, because maybe as I told you, we use Facebook, and maybe Facebook is not the best platform to do that. But to be honest, our project doesn't want to improve the online experience. We want to improve the offline experience. So it is just an instrument. So we didn't focus too much to give best performance or to give specific protection on this data. I see that people arrange by themselves. Also, for example, when they have to share private information, they arrive until one stage and then they move in a private chat and they don't share too much public information with other people. So no, it has been a very issue for social people.
Okay. Sorry?
Maybe I can also share one of my experience, just how explaining like decentralized identity to community members, like how do they actually perceive or understand the concept of it. So usually we will like explain in a way that you have your own personal identity or personal data protected by a key. And the key is actually enabling your data to be owned by yourself, but not by any of the organizations or even the solution providers like a digital platform. We cannot access the data without the keys that is owned by yourself. So it's a very simple concept just to like let them know, because of this one simple intervention, the data, the personal data belong to themselves, but not owned by any other bodies. And that's why others cannot take advantage of their data.
Okay. Then we're a bit running now out of time, but I would like to end a bit because we've got several comments from Maud Ebbes, who's a student or a graduate from TU Delft. And she is asking if this switching to online public life, if that's shouldn't be rather returning to analog public life. And maybe Franziska Turbas, you were actually, I think this is really in terms of what you also wanted to give us along as a message. Do you want to give a reaction to this question? Are we afraid of switching too much to online public life? Your micro is off.
This is a difficult question, actually. I think there is actually usually, I think the analog space is still stays pretty important. I mean, we are social beings, and we want to have the touch somehow. We want to be connected. And maybe we see this also right now in the Corona times, though, of course, there is visions of VR and AR spaces that should somehow kind of replace those analog spaces. But on the one hand, still it's somehow related with too many flaws. I mean, you still want to have the human in front of you, the human touch. But yeah, I mean, it still depends. I mean, even if the technology is that good, so that you think, okay, it doesn't matter if it's analog or virtual. Being afraid has to do with on which platform am I mingling. So I'm highly critical about too much relying on Facebook and the big Silicon Valley tech companies, or also maybe the Asian ones in different contexts of the world. So I think that, yeah, there you should be afraid, because I think it maneuvers us in a future that we are maybe now a bit not aware what that actually means. yeah, but I mean, there is a couple of open source platforms, a couple of platforms that highly, yeah, appreciate also data security. So where it's absolutely not a problem. So there you don't have to be afraid of. But I think everybody has to has to reason it about it.
Message of cautions. I would like to also wrap up. I think also for myself, what I realized throughout the discussions is that many aspects which are raised are aspects that we have discussed in urban planning for the physical space. Yeah, how to design processes, the role of intermediaries, power, yeah, who has access to spaces. All of a sudden, it seems like similar questions we ask about the virtual space, but we haven't yet understood our own role in these virtual spaces. So I think this is an exciting field we can continue working on, and I hope that this discussion has a bit triggered fruitful thought. And with that, I would like to hand over to Luisa, who still wants to announce something. Thanks a lot to everybody, to all the speakers and presenters today.
Thank you, Astrid, and thank you to all the speakers for this very interesting and insightful conversation with many different points of view and perspectives on something that I'm sure will affect our future life, since now we are into digital platforms and digital tools much more than in the past because of the pandemic. I would like just to make a small announcement, the same that I did at the beginning of the webinar, just to remind that we have another webinar next week. It will be an expert group discussion with the audience. So we will invite several speakers to reflect on previous issues that were raised and discussed during previous webinars, and we will try to answer to questions from previous webinars and from the audience attending the next webinar. So this will be a very important opportunity also for us to thank all the people that have been following our initiative since the very beginning. It is a huge effort, as you can imagine. This current one is the 11th webinar, and the next one will be the last one of the third series. But we are willing to continue also in August for the fourth series. We are receiving a lot of requests, and if anyone, you attendees, want to submit your interest to join as speakers, please submit your interest. We have a call for speakers open, and we will try to engage as many as possible. So now just to Hendrik for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much. Actually, I don't have any additional points to raise. I just want to say thank you to Astrid's team to be our guest host for this session. Also, just a reminder for others also that's a possibility for other groups also to help us to basically look at the entire session together with us. And thanks to all the speakers and also attendees that were active with different questions. And I hope you stay tuned for the next session. And you can find all videos on YouTube on the City Space Architecture YouTube channel. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.